But last week we, been walking through this series, right, called Be the Church, where we've been kind of stepping through the book of Ephesians, where we've been discovering together this reality of what it means to be a faith community, what it means to be the church. And so we, especially if we've grown up in church, we've kind of developed this mindset that church is a thing we go to, it's something that we kind of check off for an hour a week, right? Maybe if you grew up a few years ago, you went to church on Sunday morning and Sunday night and Wednesday night and probably every other day of the week. But we've gotten this rhythm, this actually bad habit of thinking of church as something that we do, like we do the dishes or we mow the lawn. But it's totally different. And it's something that we're a part of, this community that we're kind of interwoven with. And so we've been walking through this series. And last week we really kind of pressed into this reality that God is calling his people, right? Us as individuals, us as a community of people, to be hungry for growth. To be people who grow with God and become mature in our walk with Christ. So that we read it last week, that we wouldn't be tossed around, and that would be anchored in his truth and anchored in his life. And so we wrestled through a lot of things and how God is not just looking for us to be really good people who are nice and smile and look like we have life all beautiful and packed together, right? We see people all around that look like they got life all figured out. We want to be just like them. And we have this idea that being a good Christian is having life all figured out, but we discovered that that's not at all what it looks like to walk with God. That there's some messiness, that there's actually a lot of internal work that God is wanting to kind of refine us, and there's this deep work within our heart and our soul that he's actually wanting to help work us through and process us with, and this transformation of not just how good we can be, but this transformation of who we actually are. And so we wrestled through a lot of those things last week, and I loved our conversation last week. And like always, I always encourage everybody that if perhaps you missed it or you want to listen to it again, certainly check out any of our podcasts, or our church's podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, if you're a big podcast person just like me. But friends, there's something that we did that was a little weird last week, is that we actually stopped short of a verse that Paul, the guy who God used to write the book of Ephesians, was kind of building up to say. We talked through Ephesians 11 to 15, and we wrestled through a lot of those things, what it means to grow in Christ and those things, but he wrote all those actually to kind of lead up to a main point that we didn't even talk about. And perhaps if you brought a Bible with you, then you saw in front of you that we stopped a little short. What is Pastor Arnold doing? He's crazy. He's out of his mind. But you see, there's another layer of this reality of growth that God is really wanting us to uncover, and that I want to actually take a lot of our time to press into this morning, because there's something God is wanting us to realize. So let's do this. How about we nudge each other a little bit like we did last week? I say, are you ready for this? Nudge each other around a little bit, right? We're waking up, right? Don't doze off. We're here in this together. But let's press into God's word. If you want to, open your Bible to Ephesians chapter 4, verse 16. If you love to have apps for everything on your phone, I encourage you to take advantage of the YouVersion Bible app, and you can use that. All the steps on how to use it are on the back of the bulletin that you got when you walked in. But Ephesians 4:16, Paul writes this verse, and I'm simply going to read the verse before it, and then we're going to read in verse 16. Verse 15 is not here on the screen, but you'll see immediately how we flow into verse 16. But kind of just to refresh us from last week, we talked about how Paul said this. He said, "Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become, in every respect, the mature body of him who is the head, that is Christ." That was last week. And today, from him, the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. In this morning, in this moment, God is kind of sifting out this reality in front of us, that he's envisioning for the church to be like a body where Christ is the head. And if you've been around church, you've heard this imagery. But that Christ would be the head, and that from him, not just in him, right? When we read a lot of the Gospels, we read about how Jesus talks about being in God and in faith and with the Spirit and in him. If we remain in him, especially in that John 15 moment. But here, Paul says, it is from him, like an extension from him, that the people of God would be bound to each other like ligaments and elbows and all the parts of our body, that we would flow from him who is the head and be bound to one another and tied and committed and connected to each other, and that we would build up the body, the church as one in love as we each do our part. And he shares this incredible reality of how God created the church, right, to grow individually and as collectively grow, to become mature in their walk with him, so they would be kind of tied together, that they would be strengthened as one, that we can be built up together, being strong, withstanding any storm or hurricane or flood, and stand strong in the face of adversity, and stand strong as built up in love, as each ligament, as each phalange, it's about as fancy as a body term I can think of, does its part. I think of watching National Geographic and watching these shows of these explorers going into different tribes and different communities in third world countries, and seeing how every individual has a role in the community. They'd come across a tribe and they'd see how every person in some way is contributing for the life and the betterment of the community. And the reality is that God created the church to be such as that. That we would come together for the betterment of each other and for the betterment of the community that surrounds us. And that sounds really great in theory, doesn't it? That's one of those moments where, it sounds like a great idea, but for some reason we don't really do that, do we? It seems like we fight a lot in church, don't we? It seems like we get pretty upset with each other. We get angry. Perhaps this isn't the first church you've been a part of, and you've gotten burned in the past. You've been hurt. And so when we say all this stuff, it sounds great, sounds beautiful in theory. Sign me up. I can't wait. But why is it that in reality we never get to actually experience this? See, I believe there's a part of the human being, the humanity within us that has been distorted for a very long time. And it's something that we can trace back to perhaps our parents and our grandparents and generations before them, and actually all the way back to the very first people that God created. Because in the very beginning, God created Adam and Eve. And we know how the story goes, where God created this man and this woman, and God gave them responsibility, right? He gave them a sense of responsibility and ownership over creation. And hey, I want you to take care of this, naming the animals, take care of this, all these things. And he gives them work to do. And they do all these things, and God says, listen, you know what? I want to compensate you. I want to reward you for how you're doing this and for, being made in my image. And so he says, you know what, you're welcome to enjoy all that you want. Like, but then there's this tree over here. I don't want you to enjoy this tree. I don't want you to go and take anything from it. I don't want you to eat anything from it. I want you to leave it alone. But we know how the story went, how Eve had the enemy come and tempt her to indulge and to take, and then as the story unfolds, she chose to take what God told her not to. And then from that moment on, humanity was separated from God. And one of my favorite comedians that I love listening to, and especially during the last several months during COVID, where everybody's angry about everything, and where you scroll on Facebook and you can't help to get angry, I found myself watching more and more comedy videos on YouTube. And so one of my favorite comedians, he has this hilarious joke that he shares, and he's a little heftier guy, and he says, I never understood that part of the Bible. I never got how Eve was tempted by an apple. He's like, because if I was there, like if I saw an apple, it wouldn't really be all that tempting. Coat it in caramel now? Maybe. Turn it into a piece of cake? Now we're talking. But the reality is that Eve didn't go after it just because of how delicious it may have looked. See, what sparked within her was a sense of hunger. Not to, appetite within her stomach, but something within her that wanted what she couldn't have. Wanted what she was told not to have. Like walking into a museum and seeing where there's these plaques and these signs that say, please don't touch. And you're like, I don't want to touch it now. But even this moment finds herself with this rather self-centered, fueled desire and sense of fulfillment that when she saw something that she wanted for herself but yet was told she couldn't, she decided to ignore what she was told and take it anyway. And from that moment on, humanity has been marked by this reality that we have this hunger within us that's not of our stomach, but this hunger for more, this hunger to feel full, to have what perhaps we've been told we can't have, to have what perhaps our parents told us we should never do, to have because there's this curiosity within us making us believe that if we have it, we'll feel satisfied and happy. We'll feel like we're having fun and enjoying life, that we're missing out if we don't. And we have this rather sense of selfishness inside of us that desires things that we can't have, that desires for more. And especially in the economic world, we talk about this reality, how like we live in such a consumer-driven mindset, but the reality is it goes way beyond how we spend our money and the products and services that we buy in exchange. It goes deeper into who we are as human beings, that we are trying to be like mosquitoes and just extract as much as we can from life around us because we want more. We especially see this when we enter into a relationship with somebody and they take advantage of us, where they demand so much, they take so much of us, but yet give us nothing in return. And we have a friend who's always asking us for help, but when we ask for help, they don't give anything back. That's because that element of selfishness is being lived out in front of you. We see this played out in so many areas of our life. And there's this reality that God has called us to be people who live in community and contribute, but there's a deep sense of our selfishness that makes us want to consume. Our selfishness for more is making us be people who suck the air out of the room and suck the life that we can because we want to have it. We're like the Grinch. Hopefully not like as hairy and green, but we're like the Grinch when we walk into a moment, right? How he brings this giant vacuum and he sucks all the presents and all the trees, all the elements of Christmas. We bring ourselves into people's lives or to whatever is around us. Perhaps it's a job and it's money. Perhaps it's, whatever it could be. And we just try to suck and take as much as we can because we have this desire within us to feel full, right? And we feel like if we just have this or take that, if we just get this one next thing, then I'll be happy. I'll feel satisfied. So we live in such a world where humanity is driven by their need for more. And if we're to be honest, each of us, right? That we have this sense within us that wants to take. It's like we get to sit down at Thanksgiving. I know Halloween's not here yet, but listen, Thanksgiving is incredible, okay? All right, Thanksgiving is around the corner. I can't wait. All right, here pretty soon, I'll be talking about Christmas, okay? But it's a reality that here soon, we're going to sit around the Thanksgiving table, and there's going to be food laid out in front of us, food for days. And we're going to be able to enjoy it with our family, hopefully the people who don't bother us too much, and we'll be able to enjoy that time together and have fun. But there's this reality that the church is kind of meant to be a table that we are invited to. That God invites us to have a seat at the table. It's a pretty incredible reality. Where God picks us up. We're hungry. We're beat up from life. We've got a soul full of regret. We can barely sleep. We look in the mirror and we think we're so ugly and hideous. We're disgusted by how our body looks. We're disgusted by our behaviors and our past. We're disgusted by so much of who we are. But God says, I love you. Why don't you come with me and have a seat at the table? And he invites us to this table, and the reality is that there are others who get invited to the same table, right? We see somebody sit down next to us, and then somebody next to them, and we fill this table. And the reality is that, there's an element of what's on the table that God has put in front of us for us to consume, just to put that word out there. I don't think that's the right way to describe it, but for us to receive, right? God's grace, his love, his forgiveness, right? Some of those elements. But there's a reality that the seat at the table is not just for us to sit and indulge as much as we can, but there's an element of when we sit at the table and we actually reach a point where we begin to contribute, where we begin to help put food on the table, so to speak. And so there's this deep reality that as people who are growing with God, that he's calling us to be one community, like ligaments that come from the head of Christ, who are bound to each other, who are united with each other, who are bound to Christ and one another in faith by Christ, who are building each other up in love as each person, as each community does its part. As each person brings something to the table for the betterment of those who are also at the table. Are you guys tracking with me? Are you following with me? Kind of shake your head with me, right? Don't go too crazy. And so this morning, I want us to walk through a couple of things together, because I really want God to begin to stir this new desire inside of us that isn't just consumed for what we can get and what we can take. Because the reality is, if you have a heart that is fixed on taking and getting and consuming, what will happen is that you will consume Christian content. You will come and consume worship music. You will come and you will take a message and you'll go home and you'll do that week after week after week. And what will happen is you'll reach a point where you come to say, Pastor, I don't feel like I'm being fed anymore. Have you heard somebody say that? I don't feel like I'm being fed anymore at church. And it's because there's this switch that God is looking to kind of twist inside of us and to correct, to flip on, where we begin not just to receive, but to also give. And so sometimes when we find ourselves in a Christian community, we get really stumbled on how on earth, what does it look like for us to add value to the community around us? What does it look like to add value to the church, right? Because we think of what it means to serve, and we think of, well, I can never be the guy on stage. I don't know how to play guitar. We think through a lot of those things. But very quickly, I want us to kind of walk through 3 simple marks of what the church is, and then discover together what would it look like for each of us then to add value to these barrels, okay? You see, there are 3 barrels of what it looks like for the church to be. There are these 3 marks, and there's mission, there's discipleship, and then there's community, right? And so these 3 very generalized buckets of what it looks like for the church to live as community and what the path in front of the church looks like as it moves forward down the road. You see, mission is a critical element of what the church is. As the church is a people who live on mission, right? Our mission to bring the gospel of who Christ is to the world. Our mission to be gospel carriers, right? Our mission to be people who bring God's love to an unloving world. We bring his light to a very dark world. All of these things that God tells us about, that we are called to be individuals and a community that live on mission to bring the love of God to people. That way people would know him. Again, not know about him, not just be able to memorize Bible verses about him and make it look like they got everything figured out, but know that they would know what it means to be in a friendship with him. And so a major element of what the church is to be a church that is on mission and to live and breathe the gospel and the community around it. And so to live as an evangelistic community. Another element of discipleship of within the church is that it's vital for us to be people who are in a constant state of being an iron that sharpens iron, that we're growing and becoming more like Christ. That we don't just like come to church and feel like we're good, we've done it, I'm so proud of myself, I'm such a great human being, I'm such a great Christian. But no, this reality that God is wanting to do this deeper work inside of us, this element of Christian community of the church is discipleship. That our gatherings on Sunday morning is simply that calling of disciples making disciples being transposed into a gathering on Sundays and how we worship. It's transposed into small groups and different ways that we gather in groups. It's lived out in the ways that we interact with each other. But this reality that as Christian community, as a mark of the church, we are people who are eager to be made new in Christ. This work that does not stop until the day we step over the line of eternity. We're being made new. And then lastly, that element of community. This reality that God is looking for his people to actually love each other and to actually get along. I mean, Mason is just 3 years old, my son, but he's already starting to yell and slam doors. He's already starting to be a little stubborn. He's like me, it's all right. But even in our household, sometimes as a family, we don't get along. That's to an extent normal. There's some friction. Friction within the church is kind of normal. But this desire for community, desire to be united, should sit above it. And so regardless if we vote this way or vote that way, we're still one. This desire to not just know each other's first names, but to know their last name, and to know where they work and where they live, to know what they like to do, to know what they love to eat, to know their life story, to be in fellowship and a relationship with each other, to not just be a group of strangers, but to actually have meaningful relationships with one another. Now, it's impossible to have that at a large scale, right, to know everybody. But the reality within groups and different small immediate circles of people that we deeply connect with, that we have that sense of accountability and that devotion, that loyalty, and those elements. Are you following me? And so these three marks of the church are how God designed the church to be. And when it comes to us wrestling through how on earth can I add value to the church, how on earth can I step forward and contribute and not just be a consumer, I want us to ask ourselves these two questions. I want us to ask ourselves, first, what is missing? And how perhaps did God make you to help? How perhaps did God make you to fill in what's missing? Because the reality is that within our our mindsets of people who have this consumer mindset in our economy, we have this way that we think where we're frequently reviewing things as we go about life. Oh, that cashier was not a very good cashier. I can't wait to tell her manager. Or she did this wrong, this wrong, this wrong. Oh, that waiter we had, oh my goodness, they did this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, this wrong. Or oh my goodness, this car that I bought is this, and this is wrong, this is wrong with it, this is wrong with it. We're very good at critiquing things. We're very good at saying what's wrong. That's not entirely a bad trait to have. It's not an entirely bad thing to be. But there's this reality that we noticed we notice what's missing. We notice what's not there. We notice what's missing from the table. We notice if there are some collard greens missing, or some sweet potato pie. Can I get an amen? Or some pecan pie. Come on. Can I get a hallelujah? Right? Let's just keep going. We know what's missing. We see these things that are missing, and oftentimes when we come to church, we feel like it's not there. We're not being served a certain way, and so we just kind of withdraw and say, we'll just continue to shop for another church down the street. But there's this reality that God is saying, no, what is missing? But I've designed you to be a human being that fills the void. I've designed you to be a human being that actually steps up and actually fills the gap that you notice. And so there's this reality that God is wanting to use each and every single one of us, right? He's wanting to use all of us to be, connected and interwoven and to recognize what's missing, but yet say, you know what? I'm willing to step in and fill this void. I'm willing to step forward and help in this kind of way. And so what's so important for us to embody as we contemplate, God, how do you want to use me? Then simply begin to ask, what perhaps is missing? And God, how did you make me? Because we don't believe that life is on accident. We believe that life is on purpose, that God put us here on purpose. Right, church? So God brought us into this place on purpose. So God, what's it look like for you to use me to step up and change? And so I believe some of us are in a place where God is kind of inviting us to step forward and kind of turn around and begin to contribute and to help in some way for the betterment of the church. Especially as we're in this season as the corner. Especially as we're in this season of frankly having to almost restart and re-begin. As we're in this season of where pre-COVID we had tremendous momentum, room full of people, but then we find ourselves here. And the virus in a lot of ways has poked some holes in our tires. But we will certainly not stop. And so as we're in this season of pivoting and moving forward from the mud that we feel like we perhaps may be stuck in, there's this reality that God is calling us all to embrace responsibility and to add value to the team. And everyone in different capacities can. For some, it's simply the decision, I'm going to choose to be here every week. I'm going to choose to, serve. I'm going to choose to get involved. I'm going to choose to kind of restructure even my personal life. That way I can help supply funds and help donate things for the activities and the mission of the church. This reality that God calls us to donate and tithe and offering because it is what? It's gasoline for the church. Sadly, in history, many churches have taken what was meant for fuel and has kind of pimped the ride of the church. The preacher just say pimp? Yeah, he sure did. But the reality that it was always meant to be fuel. And not just put some nice rims and a new coat of paint. No, it's always meant to be fuel. Always meant to be fuel. And so it's the reality that God calls us to be people who tithe and give because we want to help. We want to help fuel the church that we're a part of. We want to help propel it forward as we reach out in the community, as we live our mission, right? As we live out being the church. For some of us, God is even speaking to us. I believe this is a big part for some of you. I really believe that God is calling us, for those who've been here for some time, He's calling us to embrace the level of spiritual maturity, where He's calling us to no longer just kind of sit on the sidelines and cheer on, but to really be people who become spiritual influencers within our church, become spiritual leaders, right? People who now are able to live out and embody what it means to grow and walk with Christ, and are able to know the process of faith and what it looks like to help people cross the line of faith, what it looks like to lead people who are new to Jesus, what it looks like to help people grow in their steps, what it looks like to help people be accountable, what it looks like to bring truth into ambiguity. Especially for this next season of our church, as we're shifting and we're seeing not just Pastor Andre lead, but all of us linking arms together and doing this as one, and doing this as one community. That we say, you know what, I'm going to be a part of this, and I'm going to rise up. I'm going to embrace the responsibility for my walk with Christ. And I want to be somebody who impacts the faith of those around me. Wouldn't that be incredible, church? That we desire this reality of being people who impact the faith of those who are around us. And so I encourage you, as you're wrestling through these things, begin to deeply wonder what it looks like to fill in the void. Begin to ask God, how do you want to use me? How do you want to use me beyond just serving, beyond just welcoming and being in the service? How do you want to use me in ways of being a person who is truly mission-minded, who is actually somebody who can disciple others? This reality of God calling us to be people who disciple each other. For so long, the pastor is the one who does the work of discipleship, but that's not what the church was meant to be. This reality that God is wanting to use us as we mature in faith, as we walk with Christ. He's wanting to use us to be those who disciple and impact the faith of those who are around us, as we lift up each other, as we chase after Jesus, as we build one community, ligament by ligament, phalange by phalange, together to be one that has been built up in love. As we all do our part. And I realize that fingers can't be tied together, okay? I realize that's not how the body works, but just bear with me. God is wanting to use us. You see, there's this rather peculiar moment when Jesus is leading his disciples. He's leading his disciples, and then two of them are brothers, and then mom comes into the moment. And mom says, listen, Jesus, would you mind letting my two sons, would you mind letting one of them kind of stand on your right and one of them stand on your left, right? Would you mind allowing them to be positioned near you so when people respect you, when they praise you, when they thank you, they're thanking them too, right? As people look to you as a great leader, a great teacher, would you put these two people next to you, my two sons? That way, who you are and the respect that people have for you would kind of code them. Don't you always love it when mom steps in and embarrasses you a little bit? And so there's this moment where Jesus hears this. And of course, all the other disciples get upset. Why did that happen, right? You know, the teacher, the one who's leading, he's always the one who picks his favorites. He's always the one who picks, his best students, all that stuff. And then Jesus kind of hushes everybody down. And he looks around the circle. He looks at everybody in their eyes, and then he begins to say these words to them. In Matthew 20, verses 26 to 28, he says this. He says, instead of kind of being positioned in authority, how our world does, he says, instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. And he says, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. This deep reality that God has called us to embody a new view of the world, where we live every day with this motto that it's not about me. That it's not about me. We miss this in a lot of parts of life. Because we make a lot of things about us, don't we? We make our marriage about us and feeling happy and getting what we want. We make our kids about us, where they do what they're told and they listen to us. We make our parents about us, where they understand us and let us do what we want. We live in a lot of ways where we say to ourselves that it is about me. But Jesus is coaching us through life, and he says, no. We've got to live with this heartbeat that it's not about us. That it's not about me. that when I go to school, whether online or in person, I'm going to learn, I'm going to be a good student, do all these things, I'm going to learn, have a great future, I'm going to do my homework. When I walk into the room, I'm here to love people because it's not about me. Even if I've had a bad morning, I'm going to smile. I'm going to be friendly. I'm going to love those who are different than me. And I'm going to encourage everyone that's around me. Because life is not about me. When we go to work, we're going to walk into the office or the shop or the field, whatever it could be. We're going to walk in with a positive attitude. We're going to walk in with some joy in our heart that's from God. And we're going to smile. Doesn't mean that we're crazy, but we're going to smile. People might think we're crazy. But we're going to smile. We're going to be loving. We're going to be caring. We're not going to let people walk over us, but we will be gracious. We will be understanding. We will listen. We will be respectful because it's not about me. When we come home from a long day, we will love our family. We will love our spouse. We will not get upset. We will not say, I need more time to relax. You take care of the kids. I've had a long day. No, we're going to be selfless because it's not about me. And we get to have the opportunity to spend time with our kids because life flies by so quick, doesn't it? When we have a chance to have a meeting or to watch TV or to get on the floor and play with our kids or to talk with them, we're going to choose to pursue them because it's not about us. Could you imagine if we lived with this kind of mentality? Could you imagine how this would change our life? If we woke up every day with a new heartbeat and a new rhythm and a new walk in our step that said, you know what? Today is not about me. There are moments where I'm going to feel beaten up, and there can be people who I lean on for help. Doesn't mean we got to pretend, doesn't mean we got to be fake, but there'll be people who I trust, who I've intentionally built Christian community with, who will encourage me, who will lift me up, who will speak truth into me, who will encourage me, all those things. But when I am in the world, it is not going to be about me. When I am interacting with people, it's not going to be about me. I'm going to add value to those I interact with. I'm going to add value to the Christian community that I'm a part of. I'm going to invest myself into other people. Because it is there that our legacy lies. It is there that the joy we have at the end of our days will come from. When we lay on our deathbed and we reflect on the things that we've done, we will be proud on the ways that we've loved people well. We'll be proud of ourselves because we obeyed God and we said, you know what? It's not about me. It's how I can care for other people. It's how I can share the gospel. It's how I can share my faith. It's how I can encourage those who are around me. It's how I can pray for people who are beaten down because life is not about me. We will come to the end of our days knowing that we've left an impact on the world that's behind us because we've known that we've lived life with this heartbeat and this perspective that it is not about me. Wouldn't it be amazing if we did this? Man, we'd be called weird for sure. But we know that we're living life the way God has told us to because it is not about us. And we see the meaningful happiness that we're getting to pass on to other people that we interact with. That we're not just sucking the joy out of the room. That we come into church on Sundays and we're not just there to say, hey, how you doing, and sit down, but we actually interact with each other and get to know each other because it's not about us. We're not just here this moment just for us. We're here to be with one another. So what if we live with this kind of heartbeat? It'd be crazy. But I believe God is calling us to this. For many years, the world has told us differently. For many years, the world has told us that everything's about us. And we believed it. But I think today is a great time for us to shift gears and say, you know what? I want to be the change that I want to see. I want to be the help that I'm expecting other people to step up for. I'm going to contribute. I'm going to give my time. I'm going to give my talent. I'm going to give my treasure. I'm going to put forth what I can and add value to my Christian community, my church that I'm a part of, the people who are in my life. Because it's not about me. Because it's not about me. Church, can we pray together? And then we're going to stand and sing another song.